Good morning, everybody. Um, just want to make sure I get this set up here. You are not going to believe this. Hot off the press, Sociological Theory. It's a new article. Daniel Winchester and Marcus Mann have written this article, and I'm going to pull it up just so you see that this is a real article. Um, let's see. Okay, this is a real article. I do want you to see that it exists. It's not letting me share my screen. Okay, well, that does not matter. I won't share my screen. You're going to have to believe me. Look it up. Mann and Winchester 2025. Do a search on Google Scholar. See for yourself. This is a real article. It's Beyond Polarization, Right-Wing News as a Quasi-Religious Phenomena. Okay, so let me walk you through this a little bit. Dan Winchester, who is a co-author on this paper, I've been reading his work for a while. He has published on really cool stuff on religion and embodiment. So he's talked about the Orthodox Church. He's talked about the practice of fasting. But this new piece out, Mann and Winchester, they're talking about Fox News as religious. And they say quasi-religious, but they tell us in three ways. Fox News and conservative news more generally. The specific case they use is Fox News. More generally, conservative news. It's epistemically religious, it's functionally religious, and it's ecologically religious. And I thought, wow, these people, they're going to want to know about it in this little corner of the internet. They're going to have thoughts and opinions. I hope they share with me. But let's walk through the article. Here's the abstract. Research on U.S. political media has demonstrated that mainstream and right-wing news are qualitatively distinct in a variety of ways. However, the dominant paradigm of political polarization and its attendant inceptions, However, the dominant paradigm of political polarization and its attendant assumptions have restricted researchers from putting these descriptive insights into new and potentially generative theoretical contexts. Okay, so there's a sociological case. We used to think about polarization. I still think about polarization. But now, what if right-wing media is actually religious? We've got to think about it differently. In this article, we propose a way forward, arguing for the merits of conceptualizing right-wing news as a quasi-religious phenomena. Okay, I see you all are talking here. Ron says, what's the liturgy, sacraments, and any other ideas that can be mapped onto it? Yes, let's talk about this. And then you're foreseeing a critique I have of this article, but what would it be for CNN as well? Because in this article, we have Mann and Winchester arguing, well, we have the right-wing news media, that's religious, and then we have the mainstream news media, that's what it's always been. So they're saying, well, this paradigm we have, this way of looking at it that says there's polarization, that's not the whole story. Actually, people on the right wing or the news media that's produced by the right wing has this religious quality to it. So they illustrate the usefulness of these distinctions. Okay, so they argue that the right-wing news ecosystem has epistemic, functional, and ecological, we'll talk about each of those, features that are more characteristic of religion than its mainstream media counterpart. See, that's it. They're looking at the right wing and they're looking at mainstream, by which they mean traditional media. They would say CNN is traditional media. So we illustrate the usefulness of these distinctions by applying them to the case of Fox News and the reporting of the 2020 presidential election. Finally, we discuss how our conceptual framework advances current and future research on mis and disinformation, international politics, structural causes and consequences. Yeah, there's mind control here, Griswold Grimm. Yes, there is. Okay, so before we totally argue about what they say, I'm just going to read you a couple paragraphs of what they say because I think it's really good. I think it's really important. So they start out, the U.S. news media landscape, like many other major institutions in the contemporary U.S., is often described as politically polarized. That's how I've been thinking about it. I think that's how a lot of other people have been thinking about it. Yet, and this is a really well-written academic article, by the way. I'm definitely going to steal the format and the thinking. This is a great theory piece. Yet, rather than reflecting on a straightforwardly polarized structure in which media organizations and audiences are symmetrically distancing along the left-right political spectrum, a large and growing set of empirical findings show that audience attention is overwhelmingly focused on either centrist, that's mainstream, sources, and they give some examples. This is important. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, major legacy networks, or more recent ascendant right-wing outlets, Breitbart, Daily Wire, Newsmax. Even more strikingly, this research finds these two media systems are characterized by important qualitative differences. The most notable being mainstream news sources' continued commitment to traditional journalistic practices of fact-based reporting and coverage of emerging news items versus right-wing sources. And they say, so this is a contrast. Fact-based journalism, that's in quotes, versus right-wing sources disciplined focused on a handful of ideologically charged topics. For example, immigration and willingness to spread political propaganda and mis or disinformation. And they've got citations for all this. So this is not just them picking this up. This is them contributing to the literature that exists. So this is an important part of the discussion. Okay, so such findings, what other people have already found, strongly imply the news media divide in the United States is characterized by difference more so than distance. Not polarization, but something else. Mainstream and right-wing news media ecosystems, in other words, do not reside on opposite poles of a shared ideological spectrum, as the language of polarization implies. Rather, they're qualitatively distinct informational worlds. So yeah, there's opposition. I knew there would be to this idea of fact-based reporting in the mainstream, and then this sort of characterization of right-wing news media as not committed to facts, disinformation, just kind of funny. So I really thought that this would generate some traction with y'all. Okay, so they want to make this case. Yeah, Friel's got some thoughts on this. They get more points if they tell you even more. They piss on you and convince you it's rain. A little bit of hypocrisy here, right? From Matthew, the book of Matthew comes out. Thank you, Dawn. So I just want to skip down to the main arguments, and then if anyone wants to come in here, of course, and give their say, I would be glad to hear it. So here's their arguments. They start out by talking about right-wing news as being epistemically religious. So epistemically, that's the way of knowledge working in a society, in a worldview, I guess. So they bring up our Geertz, who is an anthropologist. Pretty great. Okay, so I am scrolling through a bunch of them talking about their limitations. Just to be fair, there's a lot we're going to scroll past here to get to the juicy stuff. So we are scrolling through some things just to get to the theory. Okay, so they sum it up for us, though. Existing research demonstrates the right-wing news ecosystem is qualitatively distinct from its mainstream counterpart in three significant respects. It's characterized by, and this is I'm talking about the right-wing media, a ubiquity of misinformation and disinformation. 2, personality and outrage-centered programming. And 3, high levels of intra-field competition, instability, and change, all of which have no equivalent in the mainstream space and thus cannot be adequately theorized via assumptions of the polarization paradigm. So the way I've been looking at this, the story of polarization is wrong. Instead, we ought to look at right-wing news media as being religious, or at least some type of religious-like following. Okay, so let's talk about it being epistemically religious. They've got a cool table. If I would like to share the table, but I guess I won't because that's just a lot. Okay, so now here we get to the meat. They talk about Peter Berger, you've heard about, and Gertz. Gertz says the basic axiom underlying what we may perhaps call the religious perspective is everywhere the same. He who would know must first believe. It differs from the scientific perspective in that it questions the realities of everyday life, not out of an institutionalized skepticism which dissolves the world's givenness into a swirl of probabilistic hypotheses, but in terms of what it takes to be wider, non-hypothetical truths rather than detachment. Its watchword is commitment rather than analysis, encounter. And we see some of this, right? In Eco. We see some of this type of thinking about religion happening even among other people. This idea of encounter, I think that's a big deal. Commitment, you know, those so Gertz sort of lives on in how we think about our own religious lives, maybe. But the authors say Gertz eloquently makes a point that sociologists of religion have long understood religious truth claims occupy a different epistemic register than empirical ones. So they're making the point that right-wing news is epistemically religious. And to do that, they're drawing on Gertz. And they're saying, well, actually, the truth claims that are being made by these right-wing news organizations, they're not fact-based. They've said that at the top of the article. But instead, they occupy a different epistemic register. So people think of them as true. Let me just scroll down here. They explain this themselves. It is not for the sociologist to prove or disprove a person's or a population's belief in the transcendent, but rather to attempt to observe it and analyze such a belief's worldly consequences for those who hold it. They're also citing Weber here. From the religious perspective, questions of truth or falsehood in everyday life are not evaluated according to the proper application of empiricist methodologies, science and shit, but rather based on their relationship to higher order sacred truths. So they're going to go on to argue, and there's this really great article I haven't read yet, Paredes et al. 2023, which they also cite, which actually looks at people's brains, and it sees that misinformation sharing among right-wing participants is strongly associated with sacred values. And they can look in these MRI scanners and these fMRI scanners, I don't know which one they use for this article, and they see the parts of the brain light up that are more to do with the social connection of truth than to do with the actual sort of fact-based. Oh, Ron's getting poked in the axioms. I'm sorry. I felt like this would really generate some traction, and we could have some kind of discussion and discourse about how does it feel to read this. This is really surprised me to see Winchester and Mann come out with this article. It's really something. So I hope we can talk about it, Ron. I want to hear exactly how you're getting poked in the axioms. So just keeping this moving here. Right-wing news is more about, same thing happens in the left. Nico says, I want to get in on that because they do not discuss that here. This is strictly about right-wing. Kumbaya Palace. Okay, I'm focused. I'm going to get us through here. Right-wing news is functionally religious is the next point. Okay, so wait, so let me make sure I got this. They're also quoting Gertz in this is epistemically religious. Religious perspective, quote, moves beyond the realities of everyday life to wider ones which correct and complete them. And so as they're making these claims, they're pointing to actual places in the literature and then events that have happened where there's a discrepancy about the facts. So they are citing this. I want to be clear about that. Okay, now they talk about it being functionally religious and they bring in Durkheim. So the point they make here, they start out talking about, that one law that made it, how we got the major networks and all that. I won't go into that, but they say, especially for right-wing news, the purpose is no longer to, and this is a quote, produce news for a general citizenry in need of information, but to cultivate moral community among specific groups in want of collective identity and meaning. So it's about common meaning, not about this informed citizenry. So this is a need to define community against the profane every day. So there's sacred, and then they don't quite call Trump a sacred figure. They don't quite call QAnon a sacred figure. But that's generally the idea. Is that you're getting this distance from your everyday life, and you're having these sacred symbols, which are in the news culture, and then also, and this is an important argument that I do want to talk about too. Right-wing news organizations are not only cultivating content for the production of moral community, so what we've just been talking about, but they regularly extend ritualized political events and practices such as rallies into televised and online media spaces. So there's this new level of interaction that's happening. It's happening in right-wing news. Right-wing news is therefore functionally religious. And they also want to underline that this is part of a historical trajectory. As Democrats have kind of become more diverse, Republicans have been kind of targeting, the Republican elite, they say, target a more sort of non-diverse group. And so that's happening at the same time as trust in mainstream institutions is faltering among conservatives. So, and I'm sure there's really good reasons for that, right? So the next argument, the final piece is that right-wing news is ecologically religious. And so that is referring to, I'm scrolling down, there's a lot. And we're not talking about everything today. So this is a kind of piece that you would want to read 3 or 4 times, and I've read it. I've skimmed it and I've read it, so not very much. So there's a lot that we're missing. Yes, let's talk about the hypocrisy. This whole thing is an exercise in hypocrisy and projection. Perfect examples of why experts, in quotes, have lost their credibility. Yeah, Winchester is really highly respected. He's got some really great stuff. I don't know anything about Mann, but I was really surprised to see this. So we should talk about that. Okay, so, and that's why I think it's really important to talk to y'all and get your perspectives on this, because I can sit in a room full of sociologists of religion and everyone will be nodding their head, right? But talk to you and I get some truth here. Hi, Science in the Dust. I don't think I've seen you around. Let's see. Okay, the ecological thing. Formerly religious ecologies, there's schisms and so forth. This argument doesn't make that much sense to me. I'll tell you the truth. Here we suggest, due in significant part to the quasi-religious epistemic and functional characteristics outlined in the previous 2 sections, organizational ecology of right-wing U.S. news media has similar schismatic tendencies. So they're just talking about the way it sort of works in the world, how you've got lots of different platforms, lots of different competition. So it kind of works like religion in that way as well. So they show this, right, by using Fox News in the 2020 election. And they've looked at this data. It's really not that much. This is mostly a theory piece. They don't have a lot of data. Dawn is not a troll. We love Dawn. So they look at this Newsmax and they look at Fox. And basically, they point out that when Fox called the election in Arizona for Biden, tons of people went over to Newsmax. I've never used Newsmax. If you've used it, I want to hear about it because honestly, I'm going to be honest. I did not know about Newsmax until I read this um, article. So they go on, and there's more stuff here, but and I think that the reason this article really struck me is because that moment when Fox News called um, Arizona for Joe Biden, I've heard people talk about that on streams before, and so I know it's really important to some people in this community, and a ton of people feel betrayed by the media. So I think about talking to Dan Winchester about my research about once a semester, and I don't think I ever really have. So I'm going to call him up one of these days and have a conversation with him. What should I say about this piece? I'm really interested to know what people are thinking about. I think this is important too for the identity stuff we were talking about the other day. So I'm going to post. I think I posted the link. It's taking a second. So, yeah, come on, talk to me about what you really think about this article. Tell me what you're thinking. Is Fox News a religion? Does anybody agree with this? This article struck you because papers are religious artifacts. In this, yes, they are. If you get published, it's a sacred symbol. That's a big deal. Your reputation, yes, very Durkheimian. Okay, so previous work this guy did. Okay, so I only know that we'll talk about that in a minute. I want to get Grim Grizz in here.
Yeah, that's the point. This whole paper is just projection. See, the thing you have to understand is there's two types of people in the world.
Yeah.
There's the educated and the uneducated.
Okay.
So to control the uneducated, you have this one set of things you do, and to control the educated, what you do is you say you have to use more complex lies. And the key foundation is that you're special because you're educated. Like they don't use empirical science like we do. Those fools. And so you control those people with the basis of the religion that you're better than the other people, and this is a holy artifact by William and Mann. I can't believe William and Mann would say such a thing. Oh, Winchester, it must be true. They're respected priests in our. So it's just that. This is projection and offensive, and I got other streams to do.
Okay. All right. Well, Griswold Grimm really bringing it up here. It's offensive. I wanted to talk about the other work that he's done because somebody asked, and because so he's written some really great papers. He's written papers about Orthodox Christians fasting. So he's got this really great stuff. It's about the embodiment of religion. So I think we'd really, I really think he would fit in really well with especially some of this Vervaeke stuff, because he talks about, okay, so if you're practicing a religion, it's not about the mind. It's about the actual actions that you take, especially with fasting. Like you might have this particular will to fast, and you might be doing the fasting, but when you actually do it, you take stuff out of the cupboard on a fasting day. Like Orthodox Christians tend to fast, I think, on Mondays and Wednesdays. And so they fast from oil, they fast from meat, they fast from dairy products. But in our everyday lives, especially people who are converts to Orthodoxy, our everyday lives, we go about eating all those regular things. We have these habits. So we'll be. This is Winchester's work, and he writes about how you have to go through this process of putting it back, right? Because you got it out because, or you made that bologna sandwich or whatever, but that's not something you eat during a fasting day. He's got interesting work on icons. So he's got a really cool body of work. And he's wrote this great piece with somebody who writes about meditation. And so she's done this work on this embodiment of Fibonacci meditation, Pekis, if you want to look it up, and how this is an embodied practice. And so there's this really great body of work. So this is different than that. This is completely different argument. C.S. Lewis trilogy about the educated control thing. Yes. I should find that. C.S. Lewis trilogy books. Oh, the I've lost it, but I know people who were reading them, and I bought a couple. Perlandia and something. Is that the books we're talking about? Okay, Neil says right-leaning people are more conscientious, generally speaking, so more liturgical and habitual in all aspects of their lives. Is that a real comment? I mean, I don't know how you could draw this relationship, but if Neil wants to, oh, the Ransom trilogy. Okay, if Neil wants to tell me, I welcome anyone. The link is up somewhere. I can paste it again. Is that desperate if I put the link in again? Yes. I see these. Oh, you know what? Okay, so Neil says it's real. Right-wing people have right-leaning people. That's different from right-wing. Right-leaning people have routines. I would push back a little. I would say maybe it's an economic question. People who have regular jobs, who this is a reason. Even just factory workers versus retail workers. This is why retail sucks. Is because if you're working in a job that has unstable hours, you're kind of screwed in making routines. Okay, thank you, Graham. I'm a noob. How do I pin it? I'm gonna find it. Obviously, I know how to pin comments. This is going to be an education for me. Let's see. I can put myself in a timeout. I can ban and delete myself and my comments. Oh, wait, is that it? Does that do something? Hi, Neil.
Hey, you seem to be getting a lot of flack in the chat, so I come in peace.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew this was controversial. I decided
Yeah.
to do it anyway.
Yeah. No, I think you're onto something. So you know how PVK talks about people coming to sermons, people come to church to hear what they want to hear most of the time. You know, the thing about so if I go to a left-leaning church and I preach about personal sin and the need to repent and atone and maybe not publicly, but like really focus on repentance and returning back to like the path of God. If I preach that in a left-leaning church, they're going to kick me out. You know, they're going to be intolerant of that particular message. But if I go into a right-leaning church and I say like, when was the last time you like sat down with a homeless person and you allowed them to tell their entire story and you walked with someone who's like truly suffering? Like, when was the last time you did that? And like, that's going to be like, now don't get me wrong. There are right-leaning people who have done that, who have been through that. I guess what I'm saying is that everyone has their own liturgies and their own habits that become more than just a habit. They become a source of comfort, of identity. And I think you're right that the mainstream news, especially for those who are in the reason I say that right-leaning people tend to be more I think that's clinically validated. I think that's scientifically validated that right-leaning people tend to be more conscientious in their disposition based on Ocean.
Okay.
And so the aspect of conscientiousness that's probably applicable to this is orderliness. Like, they have an order to their life. Like, they wake up at the same time, they go to bed at the same time, they tune into the same program at the same time of the same person. And then have like a daily dose of reassurance that their tribe is worried about and thinking about the same things that they're worried about. Yeah. So it's almost like if you think in American psyche, if you have a separation of church and state, typically those people will go to church for one specific message of like the things that they're thinking about and need to consider and act on, and then they have their state message of but it's the same for all of us. I would just say that the left-leaning folks, their liturgy would typically be more in the vein of a cultural type, meaning like they would be less married to NPR as like a single source of truth, that NPR is like the city on the hill. It'd be more of like, oh, whatever opinion I'm listening to at the moment is within the network of trust, like people that I know and trust. When Jordan Hall talks about Blue Church, that's what he's referring to. It's like, it's not it doesn't so much matter whether the opinion is coming from the Atlantic or if it's coming from a published article. And it's more so that, oh, this person's one of us. They have done the work. They are upholding the correct values, and I can trust them. Whereas I would say where the right still believes in institutions. Like they want, like traditional people want to believe in institutions. And that includes things like Wall Street Journal, the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, or Fox News as an institution. So the right-leaning people tend to be more focused on the frame, the boundary, you mean the actual entity.
Mm-hmm.
And the left is like the spirit of whatever is like the right vibes for what I need and feel at the moment.
Let me push back a little bit. I want to push back because I hear you say the right values institutions, but we have such a decline in trust in institutions right now, and
yes,
we're not funding our institutions. So where do people on the right go?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I bemoan this because the right has lost faith in the very thing that they claim to uphold and cherish, which is what I would say is the cause of the rise of the woke right. And then on the left, a similar phenomenon happened where the left in the 90s, up to about the 90s, the left really cared about like the working class. Like they cared about the common man or woman. And with that were like family values and working class values. Like they all the stuff against like NAFTA in the 90s, for example. And that caring about the working class kind of got separated out, or you don't hear nearly. I mean, you got Bernie Sanders still, but like Bernie's basically been taken over by the identitarian part of it. And on the right, I hear you, Clara, because the right would be like, we have to save the institutions. We have to. I mean, this is really the Petersonian divide, where he says like, I don't know if the institutions can be saved. And that's a really dangerous thing, because that tells those that want to believe in institutions, hey, the very thing that I cherish and love and want to protect and want to ensure endures, is there a point of no return? And I would say that that's almost the civil war in the soul of the right now. Is like, can we redeem the institutions? And I personally really hope we can. And I'm a strong believer in the free market and free market economics, sorting that out over time. Like people vote with their feet and they vote with where they send their kids. And yeah, sorry. Why am I, who am I betraying? Yeah.
No, I hear what you're saying. I see it a little bit differently, and we can talk about that, but I want to hear from Matt too.
Do you hear from the so-called right wing that they'd be willing to agree with you about how they religiously engage with media and their institutions, so long as if they could just get someone on the left to acknowledge that it's a human disposition, it's universal, that the left engages with it as well. That's typically what I hear, but I don't know if that's what you're hearing. That's an interesting topic in itself.
Well, so the question is like, are the protests in California religious? Like, are they religious? Like, are they religious because there has to be like an official organization that is an LLC or a nonprofit that like funds the protests in California for people to go out into a highway and block a major highway? Like, is that a religious act to voluntarily block 60 to 70 mile an hour traffic, knowing that your life is actually endangered? I think so.
I think it's a different case, if I can say. I see it as a different thing because this, like from the article, like this particular article is specifically talking about conservative news media, which I just think it's qualitatively different than like actually going to a protest, which I would say that has lots of sacred symbols. I mean, you could easily make a Durkheimian argument that like going and doing this is a religious act. But I do think it's qualitatively different than talking about news media.
Like it's a more conscientious religious act. So you could say like the left's form of religion right now is something like the Pentecostal, like I'm going to go up and confess my sins to the whole world. Like I'm in the spirit of the religious act, and the right-leaning religious act is something like I'm binding myself to the tradition, to the standard, to the to the routine. Like I'm doing, yeah. I really think it matches quite closely on the personality. I really do.
I'm intrigued by the personality stuff because I mean I just really don't think about that very much. So like I don't want to dismiss it just offhand because I don't think about it. That doesn't seem right. But that's a new idea for me, and I'm struggling with how you quantify that. I guess I'm looking at a different layer. I'm looking. So to think about that on the individual layer, like personality, it might have an effect. Oh, I'm sorry, Matt. I didn't answer your question. What was your question?
Is it like is being religious optional? And I think in this framing, I think there's a lot of people on whatever the right wing is, however we define it, who are willing to go with you with this paper, so long as we're willing to say that being religious is a universal, it's indelible to the human condition. So
Okay.
it's not something that's the right does more than the left.
I would have liked to have seen the paper go in that direction. I would have liked to have seen them say, okay, conservative news media looks like a religion in this way, and then distinguish mainstream from maybe left-leaning and say, okay, well, left-leaning news does this similarly. I think it's really trendy right now to hate on conservatives. I'll say that, especially in academic circles, especially, there's all sorts of reasons for that. So yes, Matt, I wanted to see the paper argue that.
Because otherwise, a religious perspective is seen as it's a qualitative description. But now we're starting to say religious is what those people over there do, and probably pejoratively. Whereas we ourselves are less religious because we're more rational, or we have a clearer perspective. And that's where the right and the left tend to butt heads, and they probably always will.
Yeah, we're seeing that in the data. We're increasingly seeing people on the left say that they are non-religious, but then they maintain these practices that look like a lot like religion. And it is, if you claim religion and you're on the left, that is kind of increasing. It's in the data. That's but so I don't want to cut that off. But if Neil wants to name one, okay, that might be a little trolly. Is that trolly? I don't know.
No, it's a fair point. The problem is like I'm not on X, like mainly because I'm I don't think I'm a better person when I'm on when I was on Twitter in the past. Like I don't think it was like most people will say they're off it for their mental health. I think of it differently. I think of it like, is this thing actually helping me and the people I care about? And I didn't feel like Twitter reached that threshold for me. So that's why I'm not on Twitter. Yeah, I don't think Jonathan Pacheco's in that category because
that's absolutely
because I think Peugeot is actually a free market guy, very similar to me, in that he basically wants to put orthodoxy on the map as an alternative and see what let the spirit decide. Like basically what I'm of the opinion of is like, let the spirit decide. Like I want all these institutions to have alternatives and allow, through the passage of time, evolutionary processes to play out, such, because I trust in free markets and the ability for people to make their decisions freely over the course of time. Like I really trust in that, and I believe in the American project for that reason.
It just sounds like you were going to advocate for blue sky next.
I believe in blue sky too. Like if they can offer a product or service that is superior to X in whatever capacity, it's the question of TLC is therapy, is a group therapy. A lot of us, myself included, I think, and like I think blue sky is probably group therapy under what they. It doesn't matter whether it's an oppressive regime or not. Insofar as like, if someone within their psyche is convinced that they're being oppressed, they have to work through that in some way, shape, or form. Because if you add physical force, or if you add actual suppression of speech to their perceived suppression, add it, then it just adds fuel to the fire and it creates a powder keg. So I'm for like maximal speech that doesn't lead to violence or breaking the law, for that matter. Yeah.
Can you see what Neil's pointing at? It's something that until 5 minutes ago probably was it was a populist, a trust in populism that the left tended to own a little better than the right. And that's shifted because there's like, just speaking directionally, there's left, right, but there's up, down too. And right now the right is owning, the bubble up, the down, right? Like the populism, that'll shift as it has 100 times in America. It's going to shift again to the left at some point in the future. But right now, if you're more interested in institutions versus the public, you're going to be on the left. If you're more interested in the public, if you trust people over humanity, you're gonna go to the right. If you trust humanity, if you like humanity but you don't like people, you're gonna go left. And that's a factor too with this. And that's a very because of how we talk about politics in America, we talk horizontally, we talk left, right. We don't address the verticality so much. That means that this is going to continue to swing back and forth between Democrats and Republicans. They're going to play hot potato with populism until doomsday. But
there's one more thing I want to mention on Fox News real quick. I don't know if they mentioned this in your article, Clara, because sorry, I kind of skipped ahead and then jumped on. But the average age of the viewers is around 70. So so what I'm saying there is like, you could run a study of like, what is the typical lifestyle of someone over 70, and then that would have to be your control group or people like 65 to 70, or sorry, 65 to like end of their life, and then you would have to have this. You'd have to design a study where you have a control group of like everyone in that age group in the United States, and then compare them to. Do you get what I'm saying? Fox News.
Yeah. And that Fox News tagline is a little misleading because that's only a small part. Really, they talk more broadly about the streaming platforms and everything. So I'm sure it skews male. I'm sure it skews. I don't know where it would skew in terms of age. Actually, now that you point this out about Fox News, but it's not just people. It's not just old men sitting in front of their television. It's capturing a broader demographic.
So I knew a woman at my church who recently passed away, but she was like very religious in that she prayed like 2 or 3 hours daily. She'd be one of the people reading and doing things for our local church. But when she was at home, if she wasn't working, she was watching Fox News. Like that was her But yeah, and I kind of see it as like the dual separation of church and state in the American psyche that I mentioned.
Yeah. There's so many people on all sides who are totally consumed by media, every hour of the day, and so yeah, I think that is a broader American culture sort of situation where it's like, if you're not working, are you streaming television programming? Are you,
Well,
what are you doing? Yeah.
it's a really hard question, because I was reading, the book is called Wanting. I was reading it on my phone. Yeah, which is I don't like, actually. I prefer to read real books, but here I am reading on my phone. Yeah, or no, sorry, I got it mixed up. The book is called The World Beyond Your Head, and he has a chapter, and it's about you could probably look it up, but The World Beyond Your Head, and it's about our attention, our modern attention economy. And there's a chapter that's about the gambling industry, and that people are so addicted to the gambling loop that they will pee themselves, or worse, number two themselves, like in the gambling chair. And really what gambling institutions aim for is like the lifestyle gamblers, the gamblers who just build it into their daily liturgy of like, this is what they do. And so something like he quotes that something like 30 to 40%, it might be more than that. That might be a huge understatement, but like 30 to 40% of Las Vegas residents are like regular gamblers, like weekly, like every week gamblers. So like I always think about these things in terms of like alternatives and time spent, and whatever makes you feel like safe, or makes you feel validated, or makes you feel alive. Like, is the person who always jumps out of planes with a parachute because it makes them feel alive, like over and over and over again. Like, is that better? Like, maybe it's better. Like, that's pretty exciting and stimulating. But if they need to do it again and again and again, and I think the Fox News thing is more of a like I have a feeling the writer is thinking about it as a cause, and I think of it more as like an effect of people needing a home and assurance, and a place that they don't feel alone and they feel protected and safe.
And particularly older people who have spent most of their adult lives going to the television for that institutional stability. And I think younger people will go to their feed for that stability, or whatever kind of emergent shared interest group microculture that they found as a result of their feed. Like, that's kind of how they find stability. But older people, the boomers, go to the television for that, which I think is why it skews older.
Yeah. So there's that television media, and I think
Go
you're.
to this.
I don't even know where my phone is. That's terrible. But I'm in front of 3 screens right now. But younger people too, though, on the right and the left, they're getting their media from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I lost track of what I was saying, but maybe we should let Sartorian. It's nice to see you, Michael.
Save the stream, Sartorian.
What?
What?
Save the stream.
Oh, okay. Well, when I was listening to it, just even saw the first thing, from the Paul van der Clay Dutch Calvinist viewpoint. Of course, it's religious. Everything is religious, and but obviously, what the paper doesn't acknowledge is the myth of religious neutrality as it's used by what we're calling the left or whatever. And I think there's probably is a lot of ways you could divide it. Probably like socioeconomically or whatever it is, like, because being left wing is like a luxury belief for a lot of people, I think. This is how I'm seeing it. So Vervaeke's pointed out this study or whatever that shows like everybody does sort of acquire their worldview in the same way. Somebody might say they, believe in God, and while another person would say I believe in science, but they acquire those beliefs the same way. It's because of the credible influences in their life. So, but once you separate people into those camps, the God believers have this kind of faith language, whereas the people who claim to not believe in God, they will cite things as like facts. I believe in this because of facts and empirical evidence, but that's really just, it's not actually the reason why they believe it. It's the, post hoc justification for their beliefs that they cite, and um, so I was thinking about this whole religious aspect, looking at it not so much as like a religion, the way we're often, trying to be precise and using that as like the ritual, the habitual habit, but more so as the aspect of faith and what you put your faith in, and what you're approaching it. So I think a lot of the people, and I know this, a lot of the people that are clinging to the right wing news, and even it's all the way to the way more conspiratorial ones, they are insecure about who to trust. And so then once they find some source that they can trust, usually somebody that they will trust because they make a credibility enhancing display. Somebody's going to say, I could get in a lot of trouble for telling you this. They're gonna censor me if I say this, but it's important that you know. And so then somebody does this, and they sacrifice. They make that sacrifice so that we can trust them, and then we put our faith in them. We're loyal to them. The object of of faith on the other side is the person themselves. They trust themselves and their beliefs, which they've acquired through facts and empirical, data or whatever. And so then the way that they use media is very much more about it reinforces their belief in correctness. They're not.
Oh, I don't want to cut you off, but
No.
while we're on this, though, I did want to jump in a little bit and ask what might be a hard question. The thing about facts is really striking to me, and the thing about, like, there is this, and this could be controversial, but one of the things that comes up in the article is they're saying that these right-wing conservative news things are really, they are, the word you used I think was conspiratorial, some of them, and some of them just not based in facts, or spreading mis and disinformation. And so can you all shed some light for me on, like, why are people, I mean, we've talked about safety, but can I go so far as to connect that feeling of safety to the disinformation?
Of course.
What do I do?
It's looking at a chaotic world in which you don't have levers of power at your disposal, that someone is manipulating those levers without your permission, and deciding and very rationally, in a way, saying, if I can find and construct and protect a narrative that that tells me what is really going on in the world, that lets me see beyond the veil and see the master scenario, that I can name it, and dispel the lies as a result, then I get the levers of power again, at least intellectually. I could be intellectually satisfied with being not in control because I can see the master narrative. That's not especially right wing. That's just what people do when they feel, disenfranchised by the master narrative. In the 70s, that the conspiratorial people were the hippies. Right.
Yeah, the right wing media actually spends a lot more time presenting things as facts, but they don't just say that it's a fact. They actually they're unpacking the causal chain of events and people involved, and they're trying to help you, like, get the big picture. And and then people trust them because then they put their themselves on the line, whereas the other people are always saying you can trust me all the time, and then they when they talk about facts they're often saying this is a fact, and then they point to a study or an institution or an expert, and so it's so like yes like whereas the other side's always telling people think for yourself, judge for yourself. So it's just a strange thing to say. It's because they are facts that don't necessarily have institutional backing. They're called misinformation. But
what do you think about that? I tried to frame it in a way that you would recognize and find fair. And it's agnostic to the left-right polarity, I think.
yes,
You're muted, by the way.
Claire's muted.
It was interesting to me, this thing that Michael was saying about things not backed by institutions, and whether or not that makes something a fact or takes away from it being a fact. And I think I'm hearing Michael say, I'm not quite sure what you were saying there.
Well, it's just the thing is it's too much complexity. So we can take the global events of the year 2020, and there was too much stuff for an average person to know about on their own, and so then they have to decide: do I trust X or Y news source?
Mm-hmm.
And then one's saying here are the experts and here are the studies, and basically it tends to be a more reassuring message. Well, that's going to appeal to the people who don't want who for whom this event is like a novel disruption in an otherwise very stable life. Whereas for the people that are more constantly living in, experiencing the effects of like all sorts of big policy decisions because they're poor or whatever, or just because they're more skeptical, or for whatever reason, like that it just smacks of insincerity to them. Whereas the other way of presenting information is, and I think it is more empowering to the individual because you're putting it into the hands of the person watching or listening to draw their own conclusions, actually based on information. Whether or not it's completely accurate is debatable, but I think it's just there's such a separation between like.
Can I push you? I just want to push you, and this is
Yep.
going to be a little harsh, but does it matter that facts are true or not? Like, does it matter to you that facts are true? Like, how do you know something's true?
Well, this, could just go into the whole kind of like levels of meaning thing, and and facts are like infinitely available. Like that's what Jordan Peterson talks about with the whole like combinatorial explosion thing. Everybody's taking a selection of facts and stringing them into a narrative. So
it just sounds like facts don't matter.
Well,
no, I think they do, but
Clara, as a sociologist, feelings don't care about your facts.
It's true. That's true.
And people have to live. They have to figure out how to live in light of facts. And frankly, with the combinatorial explosion phenomenon, you're going to be able, and the frictionless way in which we can navigate these sort of micro communities and personalize our feeds, filter these things out, that, the algorithm actually wants to give us what we want to hear. We're going to be able to pick and choose our facts to conform to our feelings. We've been doing that for over 10 years with
But-
social media.
I think you could put it this way. If you think about like that whole like 6 degrees from like Kevin Bacon kind of a game or whatever, but but instead like think about like how many degrees of separation are between you and the president of the United States, and like college educated people are going to be probably a lot closer in general than somebody who's not, and so then so because there's so many more degrees of separation, like if they can't figure out that chain of trust all the way from starting from themselves upward to the authority structure, they're going to be skeptical of it. And I mean, and it makes sense because you can see at every level of complexity there is a certain degree of corruption, a certain degree of incompetence, and if that stuff all scales up, then that's why people that are at the bottom don't trust. They only trust the things that they can hold in their own hands, and
Sure.
whereas you go and get an education, and then you're a lot closer to that top level. It's not as much of a leap of faith to just trust the major institutions and things.
Or the more you see the sausage being made, the more you think, uh-oh. I think both are true. But do you want to talk a little bit about? I wanted to read this comment from Don. The author started out with a false assumption that MSM brings objective facts. What is MSM? I feel.
What is Ethan doing?
Mainstream media.
Thank you, mainstream media. Yeah. So that is
everything's all laggy for me.
Prejudice.
I'm assuming it's my problem.
I don't have a lag.
Yeah, you might have some delay.
Okay. I think Dawn might be onto something there.
And Fox News is filling an important ecological niche where it's postured itself as not being mainstream media while still being that, right? Which I think you could see that, and whatever the other Newsmax,
Yeah.
even more so. Yeah. So if you have an instinctive trust of institutions, but you feel betrayed by them, you still want to watch TV to get your news and to get your facts, but you don't want to watch MSNBC. So you watch one of the other ones.
Yeah, I totally see that. I want to see what Ethan's doing. Washing the dishes. That's boring. I thought I saw a rolling pin or something. I thought
what's going on?
Thought Ethan was baking.
I guess lunch. Yeah.
It wasn't me, Sartori. It wasn't me. I feel like we got to wrap this up soon. Grizz is live talking about Sherry right now.
Oh no. You've been.
Yeah.
But do you like, just to put a pin on it, like, because people who feel that they are on the out culturally, institutionally, spend a lot of time talking about that outsider versus insider thing. And I wonder about, like, if that is being sufficiently evaluated as a way of thinking about this tension in culture. I don't know if left-right has enough carrying weight. I don't think it can handle the topic, because it just seems much more about outsider versus insider going on. And I see that discussed a lot because they're on the outside on the right. I don't see that being discussed as much on the left. I think it would be a lot more fruitful if both sides were discussing it from the same plane, so to speak, you know?
Yeah, like being an outsider versus being an insider. That comes up in Strangers in Our Own Land. That's a big theme of Early Hochschild's book. That's just what that reminds me of. Yeah. But yeah, I wonder, because there's so many different sort of demographic breakdowns and times when people feel like the outsider or the insider, whether it's, like high income versus low income times, or religious versus not. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, I think that would be a much better comparison, because even as we're talking, like, or divides in like the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
A lot of the people you've met in this corner were really into Andrew Yang in like 2012, and talking, Bernie and Occupy Wall Street. These are all outsider versus insider dynamic. Like, it's confusing if you try to map it just with left right, but it's actually remarkably consistent if you just think outside versus inside, populism versus institutional trust.
Yes, I do think that's a better way of thinking about it, and that gets us out of this polarization question that the authors sort of started with, and we're trying to correct. So, oh, Matt, you solved it.
I knew a sociologist would understand this inherently. You'd get it right from the start.
I don't know that I get anything right from the start, but I do appreciate your thoughts, Matt. I feel like we should let Ethan talk, but I don't know. Maybe his dishes are more important than us. I thought that was provocative enough.
There's nothing to say. Y'all solved it. There's no point in anything. Like, we don't need to be talking heads. Otherwise, you're just doing what everybody else is doing, right? You solve the problem. Move along with the day.
Okay. Well, I guess whenever I read a provocative article, I'm gonna bring it online and see what y'all think.
I love it. That was good stuff.
Yeah. Email me, Discord me if you have more thoughts on this. This has been a fun time. I'm gonna pretend I didn't see this, Sartori. Y'all have a good. I mean, I'm gonna go eat some ice cream now. I feel like.
Celebrate.
Yeah.
Rejoice.
Oh, cool. Thanks for having us on. Thanks for bringing us into your consciousness Congress.
Thanks for coming. This was super fun. I'll see you all when I see you.